the day continues to be pressure-packed because not long after receiving this letter, Kennedy found out that SAC, Strategic Air Command, moved the nation from DEFCON 3 status to DEFCON 2 status. Okay, now think about that. So Kennedy finds out shortly after that SAC, Strategic Air Command, moved the nation from DEFCON 3 status to DEFCON 2 status. What's the difference, Glenn? Look back at your notes. What's the difference between DEFCON 3 and DEFCON 2? Because who put us on DEFCON 3? The President. Now SAC, Strategic Air Command, without telling the President, move our nation to DEFCON 2. What is that, Glenn?
DEFCON 2, they increase the force readiness, so it's less than maximum.
But it's increased, and what's the next step? DEFCON 1, and we're to war. Now, what do you think Kennedy thought about Strategic Air Command moving this nation without notifying him to DEFCON 2? What do you think he thought of that? He was angry and upset. And who did he take his frustration out on? No, not XCOM. No. Who's the overall commander of military up for XCOM? No. Who's the Maxwell Taylor. So what Kennedy did, he was furious and he responded in a very angry manner about the situation to Joint Chiefs Chairman General Maxwell Taylor. Now this is kind of important you understand this conversation. So Kennedy finds out that Strategic Air Command, SAC for short, moved the nation from DEFCON 3 to DEFCON 2 without telling him. He was very, very angry. He responded to Joint Chiefs Chairman General Maxwell Taylor. Expressed his anger. Well, General Taylor was a pretty calm, collected fellow, and he politely informed the President that SAC actually had the authority to do that. Sir, SAC actually has the authority to move us from DEFCON 3 to 2. And the President then got really angry, and he said to Kennedy said to Taylor, I have the authority. I'm the Commander-in-Chief of the United States, and I say when we go to war. So again, backing up, Strategic Air Command moved the nation from DEFCON 3 to DEFCON 2 without telling the President. He was very angry. He took out his frustrations on General Maxwell Taylor, and Taylor calmly informed the President that SAC did have the authority to move to DEFCON 2. The President didn't like that response, and he said, I have the authority. I'm the Commander-in-Chief of the United States, and I say when we go to war. Well, Maxwell Taylor respectfully responded with this. We are not at war, sir, not until DEFCON 1. And that's true. However, probably wasn't the time to say it. So again, backing up, Kennedy's first response to Taylor telling him that SAC did have the authority to move from DEFCON 3 to DEFCON 2, he said, I have the authority. I'm the Commander-in-Chief of the United States, and I say when we go to war. And Maxwell Taylor is trying to keep him, in line with what actually is true. And he said, we're not at war, sir, not until DEFCON 1. Probably not the thing to say. Now, here's Kennedy's response. And you don't have to write all these down. You just have to kind of have a clue, and I'll explain that to you. This is what Kennedy said then. He said, General, the Joint Chiefs have just signaled our intent to escalate to the Soviet Union. You signaled an escalation that I did not wish to signal and which I did not approve. He was worried about firing on ships. He wasn't going to let ships be fired on without his explicit permission. What do you think he thinks about moving the country down one level of DEFCON without him knowing? So again, he said, General, the Joint Chiefs have just signaled our intent to escalate to the Soviet Union. You signaled an escalation that I did not wish to signal and which I did not approve. And he was so doggone upset, he just said, Max, get out of here. Max, get out of here. Just basically kicked him out of the Oval Office. Kicked him out. He was that upset. Because all these little things are what given the Soviet Union the idea that what? We want to go to war. He does not want that. So who's in the Oval Office now? He dismissed the military out. XCOM meeting's over. Who's in the office? Bobby, Kenneth O'Donnell, and the president. Now this is where this is kind of interesting. President Kennedy at this point asked Kenneth O'Donnell to leave because he wanted to have a private word with Bobby. So at this point, angry and frustrated, President Kennedy asked Kenneth O'Donnell to leave because he wants to have a private conversation with his brother Bobby. Now this is kind of key that you think about this. What have they tried to keep out of the mix here, for the most part? But they're all over it now because he announced what's going on. The press. Well, the president and Bobby decide they're going to leak some information to the press. They think maybe they got to get this crisis taken care of. It's getting out of control. So they think if they leak a little information out to the press, it might help. So they call a journalist by the name of Walter Lippmann. And this is who they're going to leak through. Walter Lippmann. So the president and Bobby meet. They're kind of thinking, man, this thing's getting kind of crazy. This is going to end up in war. This military's pressing us like you can't believe. I think it's time to leak a little information to the media. And they decide to leak through a journalist by the name of Walter Lippmann. Now, I'll really be impressed if you can pull this one off. What information... Think about the solutions we've talked about for the end of this crisis, or get this crisis behind us. What information do you think they leaked to the press that they wanted out there? Anybody have any idea what they might have leaked? I told you it'd come back in the picture later on when we talked about it. I said keep this in mind because it's going to come back. As stupid as it sounded, it's going to come back. Levi.
We agreed they would agree to take the missiles out of Cuba, and we would take the missiles out of Turkey and get Guantanamo Bay.
And they even left Guantanamo Bay out. They basically leaked rumors that the United States might be interested in pulling their missiles in Turkey in exchange for the missiles in Cuba. Why would they leak that kind of information out there? Because they're looking for a solution, and whose solution are they kind of thinking about? Who brought this up in the first? Adlai Stevenson. So actually, they thought, man, it might be a good idea if we get the information out there that we might want to negotiate. Now, do you think the military is going to be thrilled to death with that? No. Okay. I'm going to hand you here, and we're going to continue, but I just want you to put this in your binder before I forget to give it to you. This is the open note quiz that I want you to take tomorrow. These are questions on what we've talked about from the last quiz to right this second. Okay? So, and we're going to continue on, but this will be due at the start of the period tomorrow. I'd rather you do them on your own, but who knows? What's the idea behind giving you this? So you know what's going to be on the test, right?
So this is like basically
This is just like quiz number 1, and these are questions coming off the test. So you need to, if you have these all filled out correctly, we'll cover them. I'll grade them. I'm gonna grade them just like if you're taking the quiz down at the Commons. So you want to make sure you do them correctly and get the detail you need. But just put them away for now. We're not going to work on them now or look at them or whatever. You'll have plenty of time to do that tonight. Okay? So put them in your 3-ring binder and we'll go from there. Now, I want you to go back. Kids. Grab your ID sheet. And here are some names I would check for the quiz we're going to take tomorrow that's going to cover from the first quiz through this material. So I would check these names on your ID sheet. Okay, are you ready? Not going to go over them. I'm just going to tell you to check them. I'd check Anatoly Dobrynin. He'll be on your match sheet tomorrow. Anatoly Dobrynin. Walter Lippmann, who we just talked about. Robert McNamara, for anything he would have done from the last quiz through this material. The USS John R. Pierce. William Ecker. George W. Anderson, Jr., and anything he would have done during this particular lecture after our last quiz. What did he do? Does anybody remember? He's the one that briefed Kennedy on the rules of engagement. Okay? George W. Anderson, Jr. These are all on your ID sheet. I just check them. John McCone. What did he do in this new material? He's the guy that did what? That told the president that the ships had either stopped and turned around so he could make arrangements to belay the order of making the sub come to the surface. Walter Sweeney. What did Walter Sweeney do in this particular test material? He's the one that briefed the president on the chances of getting all the missiles in Cuba. Could you guarantee me 100%? He said, I could guarantee 100% of the ones we know about. Remember that conversation? No DEFCON 3. Know what the Proclamation 3504 did? The Organization of American States. Gagarin, Kimhoff's definition of DEFCON 2. Strategic Air Command, or SAC, and Bucharest. Those will be the ones that will be on your matching test tomorrow. There'll be 15, 2 points apiece, 30. That assignment I just gave you to fill out, that'll be worth 20, and it's due tomorrow at the start of the period, as soon as we get in here. Okay? You know what would happen if we did not get it in by that time. Okay? Any questions? Okay, we're going to move to Thursday, October 25th. Moving to Thursday. This will be the next quiz material. Thursday, October 25th. So how do we end the day Wednesday? With the Kennedy brothers leaking information to Walter Lippmann about a possible trade of our missiles in Turkey for those in Cuba. Well, the next morning, National Security Advisor McGeorge Bundy, who we haven't talked a lot about but will, got together with Kenneth O'Donnell. Early the next morning, National Security Advisor McGeorge Bundy got together with Kenneth O'Donnell. They had a conversation. Now, what did National Security Advisor Bundy hear overnight? He heard the leak, didn't he? Because what is it at? It's in the paper, right? Because they leaked it and it's in the paper. So National Security Advisor Bundy gets together with O'Donnell. He tells O'Donnell how upset the military was over that leak about the missiles in Turkey. The military's just furious about this leak. It's in the paper the next day. National Security Advisor Bundy gets together with O'Donnell. He says, man, oh man, is the military ever mad about that? And Bundy continues to explain to O'Donnell that they all know it was Jack and Bobby behind the leak, and they are furious at it. That's the terms he used. He says, Kenny, the military knows it was Jack and Bobby that were behind this leak, and they are just furious. Because Jack was Kennedy's nickname that only his closest advisors and friends referred to him as, and Bundy would have been one of those. Okay? So he says, Bundy explains to O'Donnell that the military know it was Jack and Bobby behind the leak, and they're furious. And that just pisses off O'Donnell. He says, you mean the President and the Attorney General? In other words, he doesn't want him referring to Jack and Bobby because he doesn't feel like he has the right or the privilege to do so. So he snaps right back at McGeorge Bundy. He says, you mean the President and the Attorney General, not Jack and Bobby. Well, McGeorge Bundy kind of backs off, and he says to O'Donnell, you got to stop it. We need you to talk to them. They will listen to you. That was Bundy's comment back to O'Donnell after he kind of chewed him about the way he referred to the President and Attorney General as Jack and Bobby. He said, quote, you got to stop it. We need you to talk to them. They will listen to you. And O'Donnell kind of looks at him like, why would I talk to him? And then Bundy says that Jack and Bobby lack a moral toughness. You know they lack a moral toughness. So he says, you got to stop it. We need you to talk to them. They will listen to you. And he goes on to say that Jack and Bobby lack a moral toughness. Well, O'Donnell gets pissed off again. He gets angry at Bundy. And he says, where's your loyalty? Where's your loyalty, man? You wouldn't be in the White House as National Security Advisor if it wasn't for Jack and Bobby. Get your priorities straight here, man. I'm not going to be your Judas. I'm not going to go, you know, and we'll go behind the back of two good friends of mine and talk to them. This is what they evidently, they thought this was right. So, do you think Kenneth O'Donnell thought the leak was right? He didn't. He thought it was stupid. But is he going to let McGeorge Bundy know that he thinks it's stupid? No, because he's loyal to him. So he chooses butt, and he says, you know, let's show a little loyalty here. You wouldn't even be in the White House if it wasn't for Jack and Bobby. And he just kind of dismissed Bundy and went in to talk to who? Bobby and Jack. John Kennedy, the president, and Bobby. Well, he wasn't very happy, and he expressed his displeasure with the decision to leak that information. Now, the thing he was concerned about is O'Donnell told President Kennedy there would be only one way the world would look at the leak. Okay? And the way he saw it is he felt like the world would look at it as the United States was selling out their allies. Right? Because why do we have those missiles in Turkey? To protect the Western Hemisphere and Europe. Our allies, right? That's why we got those missiles there. And Kenneth's saying, man, that was stupid. Matter of fact, I'll let you watch in the video how bad he thought it was, because he even used the F word on it. He was that mad. But he met with the president and Bobby. He expressed his displeasure. He thought the leak was stupid. He said the only way the world would look at it, what are the allies going to think? If you're going to pull our missiles out of Jupiter, our Jupiter missiles out of Turkey, what are our allies going to think about that? Yeah, what, are you selling us out so you'll get the missiles out of Cuba? You're going to put us at risk? Those missiles were not on Jupiter, by the way. They were Jupiter missiles in Turkey. Thank you. But anyway, but can you see the point he's got? Okay? Well, during this time, the United Nations Security Council was meeting to discuss the events in Cuba. So the United Nations, they got support of the Organization of American States, right? But the one they really need support from to make this thing work is the United Nations. And there's a lot of countries in the United Nations right now that know about this, that think we're out of our minds, that we're trying to create World War III, the United States. So the focus now is going to go to get some support from the United Nations. The United States is going to need to justify to other countries around the world that their ultimatums towards the Soviet Union, because of the Soviet Union's actions in Cuba, are justified. In other words, we got to show proof that they actually are risking American lives here. And what's that proof going to be that needs to, the United Nations need, what's that? The photographs. Very good. So, as a result, the United States would need to justify to other countries around the world that we were justified in our ultimatums towards the Soviet Union and their actions in Cuba. And Press Secretary Salinger urged President Kennedy to make arrangements for Commander Ecker's photographs of the missile sites to be given to UN Ambassador Stevenson. Because where's Stevenson at right now? At that meeting of the United Nations. And what Salinger's saying is, hey, get those photographs that Ecker took. It shows that they have missile construction launching pads on the deck. It shows missiles. Let's get those to the United Nations. Let's bring those out. And the person that would have to make the United Nations support the United States' action would be Adlai Stevenson, because he's U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, right? Well, that becomes a little bit of an issue, because most of the people in Kennedy's administration, especially Bobby, didn't think that old Adlai had what it took to get the job done. Was he a real forceful SOB? No, he's a very kind-hearted man. And Bobby said, oh, we can't send him in there. He'll just kill us. He'll never get this done. He'll never get it done. The man he'd be going up against was a Soviet ambassador by the name of V.A. Zorin. And he was a hardliner. He was one tough SOB. And most of the people in the Kennedy administration, especially Bobby, thought Adlai was no match for Zorin. We can't have him be the one to try to get this done. He's too weak. He won't stand up in front of the United Nations, especially Zorin, and say anything. So Soviet Ambassador V.A. Zorin was a hardliner, And Bobby thought that Stevenson was way too weak to stand up in front of the United Nations and confront him. He wasn't that type of guy. He wasn't a confrontational person. And Bobby thought, we're going to get killed. Zorn is going to make a fool out of Stevenson, and we're not going to get any support. Well, President Kennedy doesn't feel that he can pull it. He just, I mean, how bad would that look to pull your ambassador? Okay? So who does he ask to give Stevenson a pep talk prior to his meeting at the United Nations with Czar? Who's going to give him a pep talk?
O'Donnell.
Huh?
O'Donnell.
What'd you say?
O'Donnell.
O'Donnell, yeah. Here's Kenneth O'Donnell again, the appointments secretary. He tells the role he has. President Kennedy says, Kenny, you got to give him a pep talk, man. You got to get him going. You got to get him fired up here. Because if he goes in there and just gets made a fool of by Zorn, we are sunk. So I don't want you to write this down, but this is the conversation. O'Donnell gets on the telephone and he calls Adlai, who's at the meeting of the United Nations. He calls him and he says this. He says, Adlai, the world has a right to know that what we're doing is correct, to have a chance at a political solution. We're going to need international pressure. You got to be tough, Adlai. You got to find it, buddy. And Stevenson replies, I'm an old political cat, Kenny, but I've got one life left. And O'Donnell gives him the pep talk. He says, I know you do. So, Stevenson goes into the UN meeting and aggressively confronts Ambassador Zorn. Okay? Now, this is the best part. Okay? So, they're going to leave him in there. And I'm going to give you a read-along here. This is the conversation that goes on. And what's Stevenson's goal here? To do what? What's he want to do?
Get human support.
And how's he going to do that?
Convince them that the Soviets had what they're doing is wrong.
Right, and what proof is he thinks the Soviets are going to